Are you ready to unlock the secrets behind restaurant growth and innovation? In this episode, we dive deep with the CEO of Newks Eatery, Frank, and we uncover some practical tips, some real incredible insights that he has been able to acquire over his entire career that spans back to multiple brands, and he's really doing some amazing things at Newts. If you don't know me, my name is Jeremy Julian. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at CBS North Star. We wrote the North Star point of sale solution for multi units. Please check us out at cbsnorthstar.com. And now, on to the episode. Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I thank everyone out there for joining us. As I say each and every time, you guys have got lots of choices, so thanks for hanging out. Today, I got a chance to speak to Frank before I hit the record button. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but he is leading a brand that is near and dear to my heart. Once I moved to Texas, it became one of the staples in our going out to eat type of environments. But Frank, why don't you introduce yourself before we jump into kind of the brand that you get to lead nowadays?
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Frank Paci. I'm the CEO of Newks Eatery. Been in the restaurant business for a long time. I spent some time at Burger King, Pizza Hut, McAllister's Deli, and Corner Bakery. Love the business and happy to be here to talk about it.
Awesome. You shared a little bit of the history of where you're working. I'd love for you to walk our audience through that because it's I don't say it's a regional brand, but it hasn't necessarily gotten to a nationwide prominence quite yet as far as Newt. So where did it come from? What is it? Talk me through a little bit of what the brand is for those that haven't had the privilege to experience it like my family and I have.
Right. Yeah. So Newks was originally founded in Jackson, Mississippi. Was actually founded by the same folks that founded McAllister's Deli. And so the Newcomb family founded McAllister's Deli, sold it off to private equity, and then decided to create the Newks brand after their non-compete expired. And Chris Newcomb, who was the founder of the business, used to say all the time that he fixed all the things that he didn't like with McAllister's. And so one as a brand, sandwiches, salads, soups, pizza, which helps our dinner day part on the business, and we're mainly in the Southeast, have almost 100 locations, strong in Mississippi, Alabama, Texas. Actually have a great business in Atlanta metro area. That's the story on Newks.
Awesome. And again, for those that haven't experienced it, primarily when I'm a dine-in customer, it's fast casual. Go up to the counter, order, call your number like a McAllister's or a Panera or a Corner Bakery. Again, for that consumer that hasn't been there, that's kind of the experience, right?
Right. So you order at the counter, then we deliver the food to you. It's a self-serve drinks. One of the hallmarks of the business is we have basically a 32 ounce, effectively like a stadium cup that will rotate in seasonally. And so we have self-serve drinks. So the whole thought being that, you order your food, you get your drinks, you sit at the table. Hopefully the food is out there in a short period of time. Obviously, we pride ourselves on having great quality food and great service on the business. We have in-store free breadsticks if you come in and get that. We have a condiment bar typically where you can get Parmesan and different sauces and spices and things like that. So, but that's the brand. It's about 45% of our business is dine-in, 55 is off-premise, including about 12% in catering. We do a nice size catering business as well in the area. Do great catering during home games at SEC, especially for, founded in Oxford, Mississippi. The Ole Miss is a great guest for us. So.
That's funny. I was one of my son's friends is an Ole Miss guy, and he was actually over at the house last night on summer break, and we were actually talking about your guys' brand. I said, I got this interview with the CEO. And so we love going over there. Sounds like they've partaken during those SEC football game weekends. You mentioned menu selection, Frank. I'd love to walk our listeners through. Was pizza always been on the menu? You talked about it. Part of the dilemma that I find with brands that are primarily salads and sandwiches is that they only really hit it out of the park during the lunch period, and then they struggle to even staff and bring people in during the dinner period. You mentioned that pizza helps with that dinner period. I guess first and foremost, has pizza always been on the menu? I actually enjoy the pizza personally, and so for me, it's one of my go-tos when I'm there. So I'd love to understand, has it been there? What does it contribute to just overall, and why is it something that you think differentiate you guys?
Yeah, it's always been on the menu. To your point, if you look at most fast casuals, they do struggle at dinner time. And as you know, pizza tends to skew more dinner than lunch, right? And so, oh, now we do sell a lot of pizza at lunch. So pizza is about 15% of our sales. And one of the things that we do from a value standpoint is we do a pairings. Um, so it's, we do a half pairings where you can do half sandwich and cup of soup or half salad. But we also do large pairings where we do a large sandwich where you can get a large sandwich and a half salad and a cup of soup. But we also do a pizza where you can get a pizza and a salad, for example. And they're all kind of one price now. When you get the premium items, there's a premium upcharge. So if you get our spicy shrimp pizza as an example, there's an upcharge for that. And we'll run campaigns, obviously, to try to drive. So the great news about pizza at dinner, one of the things we do as a family meal deal is 2 pizzas and a Caesar salad, which will run for between $20 and $24, depending on the market that we're in. Which, when we run those promotions, we'll see additional incremental sales in the dinner time, which is great because we've got, the staff there, and if we can drive those sales, that's a great thing for us to do. So, and we have a kids pizza, which is great for kids, right? So there's a lot of different functions that the pizza actually performs for our business. So.
No, and I think it's great because it does give you the ability to have that differentiation. If I'm not feeling like a sandwich or I'm not feeling like a salad, and even for me, it's like, and the other thing I guess I'd love to understand is how do you guys keep the quality as high as you do? Because it's the product itself, both on the pizza side and really even in just sandwiches and salads. You guys have some of the best quality fast casual food. I'm saying this as a fan of the brand, but it really is one of those things where at the price point, you guys have done a really good job of ensuring that it's fresh, it's clean. The brand is always really clean. Every time I've ever been, high level of service, you've got this condiment bar. How do you guys manage to keep the quality as high as you do, Frank?
Part of it is simplifying the operation, right? I mean, the big challenge you've got in the restaurant business, right, is everybody knows the hourly folks turn over a lot, right? And so if you're not making the operations simple, it's really difficult to execute. So our cooking platform, so it's interesting. We don't have any microwaves in store, okay? Our cooking platform is primarily conveyor ovens, right? So we'll have a conveyor stack ovens. The pizzas go on one level, the sandwiches go on another level, and it's you make up the sandwich on the right side, run it through, and then you top it when it gets out with the lettuce and tomato and whatever it gets topped with, right? And so I think part of that, we use top premium quality ingredients, right? I mean, if you look at the turkey that we're buying, the chicken, we're buying fresh chicken and cooking it up, right? We have shrimp, we have salmon on the menu, which if you look at most of the fast casual guys out there, they're not running those kind of proteins like we are. But like I said, we've tried to make it as simple as possible so that you can get the consistency of the product and design it in a way that it's hard to screw it up, let's put it that way.
Well, and that's the thing that I think as you grow outside of your core market, you do have to simplify. So you talked a lot about kind of your guys' cooking preparation and kind of what other areas did you simplify? You've been at the brand, I think, a little over 4 years now. What other things did you find, Frank, that you've seen at Newks that you've been able to simplify to help operators to be more effective? Because even before we hit the record button, you and I were talking about just some of these things that you're like, well, if we make it hard for these hourly employees, they turn over more often because it's hard. It's a hard job and they don't necessarily want to be there. So figuring out how to simplify. So primarily in food prep, or where are the other areas that you guys said, hey, let's go make this simpler for our team members?
Yeah, I mean, it's both food prep and recipe, right? So we used to do a lot of prep, like we'd get a 40-pound block of cheese in and slice that down. And then everything would then run through the oven. So to me, it's really about what's the final product that the guest gives? How do we differentiate ourselves with that product, right? So when we talk about having better quality proteins and whatever, that's part of the experience. Having our bread is going through the oven and getting kind of cooked as part of that. So when you're getting a sandwich from Newks on our Parisian roll, it is the bread's warm, the proteins are warm. All those things give you, I think, those signals of quality and freshness, that it's made just for you. Our salads are abundant and, we use, fresh ingredients on all those things. So, but as an example, that I show of ways to do that is When I get there, I always look at one of the things I always look at is actual versus theoretical cost, right? And that's something where you're training the kitchen employees to say, hey, here's the spec, make the product to the spec, right? The reason we've made it to a spec is because we feel like that spec is what the guest is expecting from us. So as an example, I noticed that we were wasting pepperoni, and I'm saying, okay, great. How are we wasting pepperoni? And then had a theory that says, okay, great. Well, on our pepperoni pizza, we use 12 slices of pepperoni. On our sausage and pepperoni, we only put spec 6. And so I ordered from 4 different restaurants, and 3 of the 4, when the pizza came, it had 12 slices of pepperoni on the sausage and pepperoni. And we said, okay, so what's going on here? It's hard to train these guys to put 12 on one and 6 on another. Let's just put 12, okay? The guest is going to get more protein. I can price it accordingly, and it makes it easier for us to train if I'm not saying, hey, do this on this one and that, because then that person's got to remember that, right? And we've got job aids and all those other kinds of things like everybody does. But I think there's ways where you can design the processes to make it simpler for consistent execution at the store and know what your cost of goods is going to be on those things.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing. And again, you and I shared prior to hit and record just the fact that you evaluate those things. And I think all too often I see brands that kind of set it and forget it and hope that, they don't go back and look at the data to be able to make decisions and then go figure out what is it? And is it something? Because quite honestly, and I'm going to say this not to be rude, there's a lot of people that would just say, just train them better.
Right.
Just tell them to go put 6 pepperonis on the half, versus your idea that says, no, let's make it simpler for that end user to make it better product for the end consumer. We're going to raise the price a little bit to cover that extra cost. But all too often I've seen operators was like, well, people are just dumb out there. We just need to make them do it better. And I love the fact that you've said, no, let's figure out how to make it simpler for that team member that is turning over as often. Is that kind of just your philosophy in general, is how do I make it as simple for the end user as possible?
Yes, it's always been. I had this epiphany when I was working at a previous brand that if you think of everything on like a 2x2, right? There's differentiation and then there's operational complexity, right? I want to live in the differentiation, high differentiation and low operational complexity, right? So even when we look at LTO products, we're evaluating those LTO products as going to be, hey, is this going to be a differentiated product that's going to be easy to execute versus a differentiated product that's going to be difficult to execute, right? I can make great products in the test kitchen with the chef, right? But can I replicate that in 100 stores across with 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds run the business, right?
Yeah, who started 48 hours, never made.
So there's a lot of things like that, and so to your point, it's always kind of looking and saying, what can we do? One of my others is we have a great Italian sandwich. I mean, tons of flavor on that. When I got there, one of the things that I looked for on actual versus theoretical, I can tell you, right? The stuff you use the most is going to have the most dollar amount, right? I'd flip that around. So, okay, where do I have the most percentage waste, right? If I'm wasting 50% of something, it may not be a lot of dollars, but obviously there's something wrong in the process where I'm wasting something there, where I'm wasting 50%. And one of the things that popped out was on this Italian sandwich, there was a mortadella, capicola, salami, and ham, right? And we're using 1 ounce of mortadella, 1 ounce of capicola. Well, guess what? We were wasting 50% because we're not using it fast enough because it's not being used anywhere else. So I went to our founder, Chris, and said, hey, we're wasting all this stuff. I think, we got tons of flavor on this with the sauces. I think we ought to, double the salami, remove the capicola and the pepperoni, and put some more ham on that, right? And I think, with all the sauces, I think you're still going to have a great product. And he was like, oh my God, he can't, it's one of my favorite sandwiches. We can't do this, right? And so, well, we made the changes because like I said, it's costing us a lot of money on that, right? 3 months later, I get an email from him. Looks like the Italian sandwich sales are going up. I said, well, part of that, Chris, is that not all the guests know what mortadella is, right? I know from a culinary standpoint, that's an elevated product, but if I'm a guest and I don't know what it is, I'm probably not going to order that sandwich. You've made it a much more accessible sandwich, and it's still a great sandwich, right? And so, I mean, just kind of different things that you can look at from a culinary. I've always kind of looked at, call it culinary ops to say, okay, great. Here's what we're doing culinarily. Here's what's happening operations-wise. how do we close that gap so that we can make sure we can execute it? You're right, or right.
And I think it's a great example, Frank, where you killed a darling that might have, in some places, they might not have had the confidence that says, hey, this Italian is great. And if we were to just tweak it, by this 10% or 20%, you're going to end up having a more consistent product that you're selling more of. I love the fact that you were bold enough to go to the founder and say that, because I find all too often people go, my grandmother always eats the bacon grilled cheese, and I can't take the bacon grilled cheese off. I don't care how hard it is to execute. We're going to always slice the cheese because that's the way we started. With the fact that you're able and willing to evaluate those standards that they had, because it really didn't change the brand that much.
Yep.
It actually made it harder to execute and harder to keep it consistent. And so that you're willing to do that.
I could reinvest those dollars somewhere else, right? Because that part of this, right, is we all know the challenges in this business of labor cost and product costs and whatever, right? If you've got inefficiencies on there, if you can figure out how to limit those inefficiencies, you could actually invest that money somewhere else, right? And so, do I want to spend more money on training this stuff? Training is an important part of the business, right? But if I'm going to train somebody to do something that's going to be difficult for them to do, I'd much rather make it be simpler for them to do.
Yeah, I love that.
Also without degrading the quality, right?
Without, you've got to take the guests into effect, and the fact that you guys are willing to test those things. But again, I find all too often, if you're like, well, this is who we are, we're not changing it. It's like, well, is that really who you need to be to compete in today's day and age? And I think we have found other brands that never were able to get off that mark and evaluate the kind of the standards, and they go the way of the dodo bird, because nobody's willing to challenge who they are and what they did in the past.
Well, I think talking about COVID and whatever, right? COVID forced some of this stuff, right? There were certain things that you had to do to survive through COVID, and it transformed our business from being more dine-in to more off-premise. But also, made you look at the menu and say things like that. I probably, if it wasn't for COVID, would we have changed the town? I don't know, right? But I think there were things like that, which is to say, hey, it's a great lesson to say, hey, always question what it is that you're doing, and how do you evolve, right? Because the brands are continually evolving. I mean, I look back and say, hey, the menu used to have this on, and now it has this. The consumer tastes evolve, right? And how do you access the brand? What's the definition of convenience, right? As you continue to look at the guest's evolution, right? I mean, I laugh because I always tell people, hey, I got a newspaper delivered every day until I didn't. And so it's things like that where things are always changing. If your brand is not evolving with that, I think you could get left behind.
Well, and you told me a story that I'd love for you to share with our audience, Frank, about pre-COVID, where, sales fell off the cliff once COVID hit. And as they were picking back up, you guys maintained your off-premise business, but picked back up and on the dine-in, when prior to COVID, I think you'd shared with me, you guys are more than 50% in dine-in,
right,
and now you're more than 50% off-prem. And I'd love to have you both tell that story and then talk about the lessons that you learned, both from a menu selection perspective and even from a staffing perspective for our listeners.
So two things happened, right? So I wasn't there during COVID, so I can just tell you anecdotally what happened, right, from looking at the historical trends. But basically, I did a stack chart, and I still do a stack chart, which says, here's how much is to go, here's how much is on premise, here's how much is digital, here's how much is delivery, right? Well, obviously, we're 60% dine-in. Well, the day COVID hits, that 60% goes to zero, right? And what you see is the immediately jump in digital ordering and to go and delivery, right? Jumps up. And then as COVID starts to unwind, you start to see the dine-in business start to slowly pick up. But what you don't see is you don't see any change in the off-premise business, basically. So, it's one of these things where maybe the guests had never tried to do digital ordering, had never tried to do these kind of things, and they had no choice but to make those. And once they did it, they said, hey, you know what, this is much more convenient, and, I like this experience. And so that stayed, but the dine-in kind of built back. And so when you look at kind of historically what's happened to our sales, we've recovered the dine-in, but kept the delivery. And I think until kind of almost the middle of last year, then you started to see the delivery and kind of maybe dine-in level up, because there was still some of that is what I would call normalization to pre-COVID times. And obviously it's different by location. Certain locations do a lot more catering than other locations do, but that's just an average when you look at it.
Well, and that was really where my next line of questioning was going, Frank, is I've talked with other CEOs, both on the show and just kind of in life, about their catering business. Catering has been hard to get back for a lot of brands. Help me understand how you guys were able to not only maintain some of the catering business, because not all offices are back to the office. Not everybody's got, so much of catering was during meal periods, during the lunch period, it was catering this business meeting and those kind of things. You guys obviously have been able to figure out, at least in some stores, how to do that. How has that been effective? Product selection is always easy. Am I going to have, you got soup, you got salads, you got sandwiches.
Right.
Those typically travel really well. Pizza travels really well. So that put you guys in the top percent there. And even going back out and selling catering has not been easy for a lot of brands, and they've struggled to make back to those pre-COVID numbers, or even many of them are just like, we're not even doing catering, and it's very productive. It ends up leveling out some of your sales volume. So how have you guys been so effective at doing that?
Well, it's really a combined focus. So we have a director of catering sales who does a fantastic job, has great relationships, but we've also leaned heavily on Easy Cater and the Easy Cater business, and really looking at stores on a semi-monthly basis to say, okay, where are we in the queue, and do we want to spend some additional money to promote where we get on the Easy Cater business? So that's really been one of the ways that we picked it up. And as you said, I think our product lends itself to catering, right? So, and we've also done product development. We added wraps as an additional product because we know that travels well for catering, which we didn't have wraps until a fourth quarter of last year, right? So that was part of that was, when we think of menu innovation, the menu innovation is what do we do? And we're actually looking at different packaging for catering, right? So we actually do some hot catering where we do sliders where, we'll provide the protein hot. So like for the Newks Q with the chicken and the Q sauce comes in there, and then we'll give you small buns where you can make your own sliders as part of it. So part of it's packaging, part of it is menu innovation, and part of it is using the resources like Easy Catering to grow that business and just building the relationships. We have some franchisees who do a phenomenal job on catering. So.
And for those that have not made that investment, I'm certain it contributes both to the top line and to the bottom line of those stores that with the franchise groups that are doing that. Is that, I guess, for those that are sitting out here, they're like, hey, we don't have a catering business. I haven't made that investment, that might be running a different brand. Why would you encourage them to consider making that investment?
Well, so one of the challenges is obviously Easy Cater charges you a commission, right? And so there are some challenge with that. But the other part of that, then we've also leaned on Deliver That to actually deliver. Because one of the challenges with catering is the last mile of catering to say, how do I get that to the guest without taking my manager out of the store during my key lunch time period? And so,
because nobody wants catering at 9 a.m. for lunch meeting.
Yeah, we've actually done where we've leveraged kind of outsource resources on both Easy Cater and Deliver That to leverage that. We've had franchisees who use DoorDash to drivers to deliver catering ahead of the peak lunchtime. And typically a catering order is a significantly larger order. So when we look at that, we're also kind of leveraging labor, right? So when you look at it and say, okay, great, I'm paying commission, I'm paying some of these other things, but if you look at that as incremental sales, we think it's profitable. It might make less as a percentage, but from dollar margins, I learned a long time ago, you take dollars to the bank, not percentages to the bank, right?
Try and remind my team that all the time. It's, if I'm going to make this amount on the same device, I don't care if it's 10% less. We're just working from a different cost basis than we are. To your point, I don't deposit percentages. I deposit dollars. So
when we look at sales, managing labor on a sales per labor hour basis, right? When we manage that, we do a different factor on the catering orders because you're kind of doing that bulk assembly as opposed to, in the line of fire at the heat of lunch, kind of, making sandwiches and salads, right? A little bit different in terms of the effort that goes into that. So.
Awesome. One last thread, Frank, you guys have recently reinvested in the system in kind of tech to make tech enabled. I know you and I talked a little bit about putting kiosks out. Talk to me a little bit about the thought process to going there, because again, as a consumer, It's it is something convenient. You talked about that being one of the pillars that you always think about. Why was both, having an app and having, the ability to order on EasyCater, so many different ways to make the brand accessible, including in-store kiosk. Why was that something you guys considered going after in your concept?
Again, to me, it's one of the keys always been about convenience, right? So to me, I want to be able to meet the guests on how they want to do it. If they want to get delivery, that's great. If they want to pick it up in store, if they want order at the kiosk. Obviously at lunchtime, we'll tend to get lines, right? Having an extra place to order. And it's interesting. I was in a store once and the cashier was available and the person said, hey, they wanted to use the kiosk, right? And so, I look at, and this kind of gets into, different age groups, right? I mean, I look at some of the younger folks today, they'd much rather text than talk on the phone, right? When I was growing up, you talked on the phone, right? They want to text. So they want to have that, they don't want to have that interaction, or they don't want to feel that pressure of, hey, I have to decide, I'm holding up the line here. I have to make this tough decision of whether I want a pizza or a sandwich or a soup at Newks. I can go to the kiosk and take my time and not feel that pressure, right, behind me. And so, I think it's one of those things is that we do it. We also have, you can order from the table, right? Because I always think about the fact that my phone is a kiosk, right? And so I can order it from anywhere, and we still take phone orders too. So if you think about, it's funny because we'll look at these daily reports and it's okay, great. I had a phone order, I had a grab and go order, I had a digital pickup order, I had an order to go in the store, I had a dine-in order, I had a Newks.com delivery, I had a third-party delivery order. Oh my God, how many different ways do you want to access that? But the reality is that the guest wants to access it in different ways, and we're trying to make that as convenient as possible for them.
Well, and I think, like you said earlier, you made it easy for the staff members too, because you guys have integrated the stack so that it comes through as if it was a cashier order. It's not this disconnected systems where they're having to manage 12 different systems. I know that was part of your guys' reinvestment. So not only are you making it easier for the staff members, but you guys are also spending the time to make it easier for the consumer. So what's the future hold, Frank, for Newts? Like, where are you guys at? Where are you guys growing? Talk to me a little bit about what does the growth trajectory look like, and what are you guys looking for in potential business partners to help make the brand more accessible?
Yeah, obviously one of the keys for us is to get the right franchise partners in this business, right? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity. Fast casual continues to grow as a business. I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks out there who are in the restaurant business who want to grow with a great brand, to grow with the Newks brand. We're obviously strong in the Southeast, but we're looking to expand up from our core base. So lots of opportunities in the Carolinas for us. We're already in Tennessee, but Tennessee, Kentucky, from Texas up into, we've got one store in Oklahoma. We've actually just signed a franchisee in Kansas. And we've got a new store that's opening in North Georgia as well, kind of going into South Carolina. So, and we have a strong presence in North Florida. So I think there's for me, it's always easier to grow from your contiguous, especially with distribution and all those kind of things, where people already know the brand. So I love when we post on social media and we'll get all these bring the Newks to this town and that town, right? So it's great. You feel great that you've got kind of this pent up demand to go to places. And one of the things we've done is we've also modified the concept, because now that we don't do as much on premise, we can do it in a smaller facility. So we've actually got some smaller locations that we've opened that are great, because obviously it's lower construction costs, lower occupancy costs on those things, which kind of make the store unit level economics be better. So
yeah, I love that. And where would people learn more? How do people engage to figure out how to learn more about kind of what the franchise system might look like if they're at that place where like, yeah, I love that concept. I was at an Ole Miss game and I had it. Now I got to go. I went there and now I want one local. What does that look like? Is it just jumping on the website?
Yeah. If you go to Newks.com, at the top, there's a franchise you can pull up. We actually have a walkthrough that you can walk through a restaurant and see that. And yeah, that's the best way to do that. And we'll have someone get in contact with you if you're interested in that.
Wonderful. For my restaurant people, I always ask this question: what's your go-to menu item? And for those what's your personal? And then what's your, hey, somebody's never been to Newks, what should they experience?
Well, it's interesting. My personal is the Newks Q pizza, which was actually we had our top selling sandwich is the Newks Q. So if you don't know anything about Newks, you need to do the Newks Q or the Newks favorite salad, which is the best selling salad. But one of our employees, long-term employees, said, that a Newks Q is a white barbecue sauce. That would be great on a pizza. And so we actually, at that employee's suggestion, we made a pizza, and it's like our third best-selling pizza, the Newks Q, because it's a unique pizza product. It's a white barbecue sauce, chicken, bacon, and jalapenos. So when I'm going to Newks, that's my favorite. So I don't know that I can eat a whole one at a sitting, but it's great because then I get to have it twice. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Every time I talk to restaurant people, they're like, oh, I can tell you my favorite. And then half the time they want to modify it. They take that Newks cube, but they're like, oh, you got to put extra jalapenos on it. Or tell them to mix in some regular barbecue sauce to it. Or my wife used to work at In-N-Out growing up. And so I always tease her because she doesn't eat cheeseburgers anywhere else the same way she does at In-N-Out. Same thing with her fries. She doesn't have them the same way that she has them, but she worked at In-N-Out, and so she squeezes lemon on them. And it's like this weird thing. I'm like, babe, you never put lemon on anything else, but at In-N-Out, because you spend so many hours there, you end up coming up with some crazy creations.
It is amazing the number of modifications that we get on products, right? Which is great. I mean, that's part of it. Make it your own. And yeah, it's funny because you'll see this the same. I want this. Add this, take this off of it. Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. So then you wonder why every once in a while the order's not accurate, because you're like standing on your head to do the thing, but you got to work on it all the time.
I love it. Frank, thank you so much for sharing the story. I love, I'm a huge fanboy myself. I have some of those stadium cups in my pantry, just on the other side of that wall. And I wish I would have grabbed one to show it to you on the show. To our listeners, guys, we know that you guys got lots of choices, so thanks for hanging out. If you haven't already checked out newts.com, check out their franchising webpage. Great concept. I would highly encourage you guys, if you guys are in the franchising space, to check it out. Again, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so and make it a great day.